have a cold again. I don't know, I might be diabetic or something. Hi everybody, I just wanted to say thank you so much for all of you who watched my last video. Getting 180,000 views in just a couple of days was just an insane experience, and I am extremely grateful for all of you for watching and for all your great comments. Funnily enough, even though that video was about a tiny French synthesizer, the question that came up the most in the comments was, what's the name of that tiny French MIDI controller that you're using? Is that an iPlay, a J-Play, a 2Play? Well, today all will be revealed as I show you this very special little bundle of Joué. See what I did there? This is the Joue Play Pro, a very innovative and refreshing take on the good old MIDI controller stick. Instead of the usual fixed keyboard or drum pads, this controller uses a system of interchangeable pads with distinct layouts that gives you a surprisingly vast array of options, feel, and customizability. Is that a real word? Yeah, customizability, that's a real word. Modular MIDI, if you will. If you're already subscribed, huge welcome back. If this is your first time here,
hi, welcome to the Midlight Synthesis. Let's get started.
It might surprise you that the Joué is not exactly a new release. There's a video by Tjeu right here on YouTube that dates way back to the olden times, pre-COVID, about 4 years ago. I'm guessing that the pandemic and resource shortages played a hand here, but for whatever reason, the Joué pretty much passed completely inadvertently under my gas radar. Fast forward to 2023, and the good folks over at Joué reached out to send me a unit along with a couple of pads for me to try out and review. And just before someone in the comments cries out, "Chill!" No, I'm not being paid for this review. All my opinions are my own. Joué have no say whatsoever over the contents of this video, and they also don't get to see it before you do. So what exactly is Joué? The core of the Joué is this slab of metal on wood with a single USB-C port and a small LED on the side. At the center is a panel where you lay down your pads to play with. As far as build quality goes, it feels really well made and pretty sturdy. So much so that I've been carrying it around with me in my backpack with no issues whatsoever. The cool bit about the Joué are the pads that you slap on top of this thing. They come in various shapes and sizes with stuff like keys, drum pads, or my personal favorite, a guitar fretboard. I have no idea how, but the Joué immediately recognizes the pad that you put on it, so switching out a setup is pretty nice and fast. The Joué not only recognizes the pad you're using, it also remembers all its settings, like what MIDI channel it's on and whether or not you set it up to send MPE or not. And yes, you can set it up to your taste and customize the specifics of your desired configurations on the free Joué companion app, which allows you to map out things like pressure range, note scale, MIDI channel, among other things. The app itself is pretty straightforward and to the point, though I've had a few instances where it got buggy and it either wouldn't recognize my Joué or got frozen for a bit. Thankfully, that was easily fixed by unplugging the Joué and just restarting the app, so not exactly a deal breaker. After that initial configuration, once you unplug the Joué, those settings will carry on, so it's a good idea to make a cheat sheet if you don't plan on plugging this into a computer that often, as is my case. After that's done, it's off to the races, and you can use this with whatever hardware or software you like. The pads themselves are made from silicone, I believe, and they seem to be pretty tough. That being said, as with all rubberized materials in music gear and particularly MPE controllers, my only concern here is about the life expectancy of these pads. That is, until they start to break up or maybe fade out after a long period of time, especially since when you're doing MPE stuff, you press and pull on these things pretty hard. So far though, they're holding up just fine. A good thing to keep in mind is that since these pads are sold separately, you can at the very least replace the ones you use the most down the line if it ever starts wearing out. But midlife, you delightfully deranged beacon of gear lust, I hear you say. How do you connect the Joué to a DAW-less setup if the only port on this thing is a USB-C? Worry not, my dear viewers, the guys at Joué figured that one out and have made one of the goofiest looking, but at the same time, coolest cables I've ever seen. This fine specimen right here is a USB-A to USB-C 5-pin MIDI cable splitter. This allows you to power up the Joué via USB with a cell phone charger and control your synths without having to hook it up to a computer. This cable is what makes this really fun for a DAW-inclined musician such as myself. As an on-the-go controller, this thing is a blast. It comes with a pouch that fits in the Joué and a couple of pads, so you can basically go around with a huge array of options in a very small package, just like my missus likes it. You do have to do some prep work if you want everything to go smoothly in a DAW setup though, since you can't configure things like scales or MIDI channels directly on the Joué without the companion app. Now, once you set everything up, it's a very cool experience. I find that this setup is pretty inspiring for feeling out melodies, mostly because the keys themselves are so responsive. If you're comfortable with the keys on a key step, you should be perfectly at home with the size of this. As for the fretboard pad, that one's kind of a hit and miss. It's both my favorite and the most difficult one to use. On one hand, if you already play guitar, it's very cool to apply guitar scale shapes and find melodies and chords and apply them to a synth. The familiar yet new layout leads to loads of creative exploration, and it's yielded some very inspiring moments. That said, however, this is probably the hardest pad to really learn how to use properly, since you're essentially finger tapping your way along a horizontal guitar fretboard. To put it simply, I play guitar and I still find it pretty weird sometimes. Another thing to note on the fretboard pad is the sensitivity of the y-axis. Just a bit of pressure up or down will give you a bit of a pitch bend, which can make this pad a lot more difficult to play effectively. You can of course just customize the pitch bend range and sensitivity or just turn it off, but something to keep in mind nonetheless. Hi. If you're enjoying this video, I would really appreciate it if you could take a second to boop that like button down there. That tiny little click helps this video get seen by more people and keeps this channel alive so I can keep making more of these. Thanks a lot. Another unusual one is the scale or bar pad. This one's special because you can set it to a variety of musical scales and set the root note on the app. You get pretty much all the traditional scales and some exotic ones. So if you're looking to get out of a musical rut and looking for ways to expand your musical creativity, this is a pretty good place to look. This pad in particular sports some very cool MPE action when going up and down the individual columns. So depending on your synth and your settings, it can get pretty wild. As for the pads themselves, I was pleasantly surprised to find that they were very responsive actually. The layouts are fun and very conducive to creativity, but I would caution anyone thinking of making this their main daily driver. For one part, they're great at making drum beats or improvising melodic lines and getting freaky with your MPE, but they're also pretty constraining if you want to play more complex patterns across a wider range of octaves, or make chords, though this is also true for pretty much any MIDI controller of this size. The second issue is that even though these pads are rubbery and kind of soft, you're still hitting down on a fixed surface, which can get a bit fatiguing on your fingers after a while since there's no travel or cushioning here to speak of. I think it would also be fair to mention a few cons compared to other MIDI controllers in the same price and size bracket. To me, the biggest con here is the need to configure everything on the companion app. It's by no means a deal breaker, but it does mean that you're always tied to the editor so you can make adjustments. If you're on your DAW setup and you're making a banger, it does kind of kill the mood if you need to break away from the moment and plug the Joué into an app so you can adjust the scales on the column pad or change a MIDI channel or whatever. As I said before, not exactly a deal breaker since just a small change in your workflow can fix that by setting things up before you start playing. The other con when comparing it to something like the Keystep 37, for example, is the lack of any visual feedback. There's really no way of knowing what the MIDI channel is or what you're controlling with what knob or the fader positions are unless you just start looking at the device you're controlling to figure these things out. Also, the Keystep 37 has other functionalities like chord mode, strum mode, sequencing capabilities, arpeggiator, etc. It doesn't have MPE, but it does have CV outs, so that's another thing to keep in mind. So who exactly is the Joué for then? I see this as the perfect companion for iPad music producers, on-the-go DAW users, and DAW-less musicians looking for having lots of options in a small footprint. The sheer versatility of having 4 controllers in just one, in this size, coupled with MPE functionality, and why not just say it out loud? The very cool looking aesthetics make this a very interesting choice in an otherwise pretty crowded and monotonous MIDI market. The Joué stands out as something fresh, a return to the playful nature of making music, and I'm pretty happy it's here. If you made it this far, I can't thank you enough for watching, and if you want to support this channel, you can do so by joining my Patreon, where you'll find just the most amazing group of people on any Discord ever. You can also do a lot to support the channel by just subscribing, or using one of my affiliate links down below to get yourself that shiny new piece of gear you've been wanting to buy the whole week, but you didn't want to tick off your significant other. Go ahead, it's our little secret. As always, thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you found this video useful, or at least entertaining. Have a great week. See you in the next one.